The sounds of a saxophone prodigy, Immanuel Wilkins made his spectacular debut in 2020 with Amiga, an album the New York Times named their top jazz record of that year. Now headlining at the Jazz à la Villette Festival here in Paris, he joins us in the studio. Welcome to the show, Emmanuel.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
Now, you started off in music super early. You're still very young, just 27. Music classes in Philadelphia, where you grew up, then the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. But do you remember the first time you heard jazz? It must have left an impression, right?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I mean, I remember my first time improvising was, I started off with violin. When I was 3 years old, I remember my parents coming to pick me up from a lesson and my teacher asking me to play something for my parents, and I knew in that moment that it would be way better if I made up something than if I tried to play what was on the paper.
True jazz man, even as a kid.
Exactly.
So I believe that you were just 12 years old when you were invited to hang out with some of the members of the Sun Ra Orchestra in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The great leader, Sun Ra himself, the leader, was no longer alive at that time. But what was the scene like there?
Yeah, I mean, it was really great. I got to work a lot with Marshall Allen, who is 100 years old now. He's still playing. He's still killing it. And we actually just recorded something maybe like a few months ago for Michelle and Degio Cello. But yeah, I mean, that experience it's just really nice to be around elders of the music and people who have been playing this music for a long time and taught me a lot, you know.
Certainly a lot about improvisation. Well, your debut album, Amiga, which I mentioned on the Blue Note label, was applauded far and wide. It got Emmanuel's career started with a bang. Let's hear some of the music from that record. This is your Tiny Desk concert for NPR. So that concert there was recorded at the beginning of 2021. We were still very much in the COVID-19 pandemic at that time, because essentially you launched a music career when live music performance wasn't really feasible.
Absolutely.
How much of a problem was that for a jazz musician?
I mean, it was a huge problem because we didn't have any ways of playing with each other. You know, this music is it's an improvisational music, it's a conversational music, it's a social music. So, I mean, we thrive off of human connection with the audience, but then also interpersonal connections within the band. So, it's a collaborative effort, and I missed playing with my friends.
And how did you adapt to the studio setup?
I mean, you got to make it feel like home, you know. I think during the pandemic, I actually really learned how to become a better studio musician. Also, I was doing a lot of home recording, so it was nice. I was always kind of in that space, in that headspace. So, yeah, it started to feel pretty comfortable for me.
Okay, so another string to your bow. Well, Black history, identity, and spirituality informs the music you make. And I think that's the case for your upcoming record as well, which dives into the rich heritage of blues. Let's get a taste of that new album, Blues Blood, in this short clip.
Blues Blood is aimed at creating space to think about the legacies of our ancestors. Blood come out and reflect on what we leave behind our bloodline. Yao Adjiman on vocals, Ganavia Doris Swami on vocals, Cecile McDoom on vocals, Marvin Sewell on guitar. A quote from Daniel Ham. Ham was a part of Ellie Beaton's young prison guard in the Harlem trial, who were falsely accused of murder.
So blues has a very rich history, of course. Tell us about why you wanted to explore that.
I think for me, what I find fascinating about the blues is a certain kind of mining of the ruins, a certain like pleasure and pain, a certain wallowing in a pain that I think is healing for Black people, and I think it's healing for all people. I think it has a lot of alchemical powers to really help people out through whatever they're going through, and I just thought it was interesting to maybe explore blues as an essence, blues as something that, maybe it could be a form. It's elusive, right? It could be a form. It could be a set of chords. It could also be a rhythm, or it could be a type of music. The blues is just such an expansive art form, and idea, and so I thought it would be cool to tackle that. And it's also at the core of jazz music, so I felt like maybe at this point in my life it's important that I really deal with the blues deeply,
Well, moving on now to an example of music as ritual. A new exhibition at the Quai Branly Museum here in Paris shines a light on the mourning traditions of the Punu people from Gabon. Using sacred harps, women there provide a beautiful and melancholy soundtrack to mark the transition between life and death. Artist Miriam Mahindu has drawn inspiration from these ancestral practices with a collection of objects and performances. Solène Claus and Jennifer Ben-Brahim have this report.
The delicate art of mourning the dead. Like generations of Punu women from southern Gabon, Miriam Mahindu learned how to console bereaved families. The ritual is often performed by widows who use music for its cathartic properties. Playing sacred harps to create a unique sound, the artist has reproduced them in her own style.
I asked the museum to bring the harps out of their reserve, and then at the Pottery Research Center in Limoges, we made some fragments from earth that I'd brought from Gabon, so I could experiment with them, and that's how I created these pieces.
Earthenware sculptures and ceramic creations. The visual journey is scored by a plaintive song, performed by Punu singer Anne-Fleur Bachelilis. It's a multi-sensory experience.
And this was something that really called my attention because it was dealing with sound and art and using the artifacts here in the museum to create a narrative about those objects that we don't usually see in that way.
The thing I noticed first, of course, is the singing of the woman. It was a very beautiful song, and I found that was very consoling and felt good.
A moment of reflection or reverie, with his woven vine offering a lifeline or a guide for visitors keen to get a hold of a work on show.
For me, the visitors are central to this show, a bit like people entering a temple, and by the simple fact of being there, they sort of activate these pieces. I made sure that there was a tactile component to the experience with the Manu piece, which means life within all life, where the visitor can touch it, feeling the vibration of the songs between their fingers.
Through this multifaceted work, Miriam Mahindu explores the ancestral practices of the Punu woman and shows us how they weave an artistic bond between the living and the dead.
So that use of sound as a rite of passage at emotional times, is that something you can relate to?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think that I think sound it's possible for sound to transmit, and really, I think that sound has the potential for us to, discover our ancestry and find ways to connect to past histories and people who came before us, through the music.
And those universal experiences like mourning, for example.
100%, yeah.
So you play with a quartet, musical collaborators and friends, I believe.
Absolutely.
One of the tracks on your previous album, The Seventh Hand, lasts about 27 minutes on the record.
Yeah.
But I believe when you perform it live, due to the nature of improvisation, it could be shorter, it could be longer, it could be different.
Absolutely.
What is it that dictates how that one's going to come out on the day?
The audience, and also the kind of the spirit of the room, everything. It's up to, how we're feeling that day, how the travel was that day, did we get enough rest? But also it has to do with how the set went. A lot of it, especially with that last piece that lasts around 30 minutes, it's kind of about following the momentum of the set. It's usually the last song, so it feels like a combustion point. It's like at the point of departure. It's a place where we're kind of just following the energy of what's going on in the music,
Wow, and so the audience gets a unique performance every time.
Totally, every time.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're wrapping up the show with more music from Jazz à la Villette. This is the Creole blues group Delgrès, who are releasing a new album, Promis le Ciel. This track is called À la fin. Otherwise, do check in with us here next time on France 24 for more arts and culture. There's more news coming up just after this.
Come on.